Do you like new characters for Fury of Dracula? No? Then why click on this video? But for everyone else here, I have been putting a lot of time and thought into coming up with new hunters, if I were to design new hunters for Fury of Dracula. But a lot of people have done that on Board Game Geek. And from what I have seen, most of them have done it wrong. Because this isn't like other games where you can just come up with new abilities and come up with new cards and maybe swap HP around and be like, hey, new hunter, throw that person in. Because the game is really balanced around four specific hunters with specific abilities that go in a specific initiative order. And that's why it has taken me so long to make this video. Um, because you can't just have like two hunters that are like Van Helsing that have Van Helsing's ability. The game has to have a leadership like ability where you can trade cards around for the game to function. You have to have a hunter that's bitten for the game to function. So the idea I basically had in designing the hunters was I looked at each of the four hunters as also having this sort of class associated with him. Lord Godalming is the class of the first initiative person because the game is designed around the people who go early being strong and the people going late being weak. So Lord Godalming is in the first rank and the second rank and the third rank and the fourth rank. If I wanted to spend a lot of time, I would name these classes, but I'm not going to. Um, just seen a lot of people who design hunters who are just like, oh yeah, new abilities. But I think you have to, when you're designing new hunters for this game, and this is essentially what I decided to do, you have to basically say these are replacements for the existing hunters. This person swaps out for Godalming, this person swaps out for Van Helsing, and I also maybe think that you kind of have to use all of them. Or maybe not. That I'm kind of on the fence on. But without further ado, let's get started. Do you like pictures? Because you're not going to get any. You're going to get a wall of text. So, surprising approximately no one, the first new hunter is Quincy Morris. No shock. The other rule I had is that all of the hunters have to be from Dracula the book. So we're going to get some deep cuts in here, but there's some really cool characters in that book. And of course, the biggest one I think is Quincy Morris. He seems like a high HP guy. He seems very similar to Lord Godalming in the sense that he's the fighty type guy. So he's a swap for him. So when you look at Lord Godalming, you think, what is it that Lord Godalming can do? Well, he has a lot of hit points. He can get items fast and he can move fast. So I needed some sort of item ability, some sort of movement ability, and he needs to be tanky. And with an event, that's another thing. People forget to give new events when they're making a new character. If you're taking out Lord Godalming and replacing him with somebody, you need to have a different event. So, his ability, number one, is Texan. After you discard a weapon, except as the result of exceeding your hand limit, return that weapon to your hand or to the table if it was played during combat. So, essentially, Quincy Morris can have his weapons broken and canceled by strength, and then he gets them back. Uh, or, it says, if your hand or to the table if it was played during combat. Right, okay, so this card does not let you double play a rifle if it's broken by strength, um, or if it's like stolen by a spy or discarded for a saboteur. No, discarded for a spy. Things like that. I like calling it Texan because also in the book he just has guns. And he's like, oh yeah, I just have guns. And as a Texan, I can confirm we all just have guns. We don't really generally tell you where they are, but if you're in a room with 10 Texans, assume that there's at least 15 guns in that room. Because most people have backups, and maybe one or two of them may not actually have guns. And like, I'm not even actually joking here. Part of the reason why Texans don't travel necessarily as much is because we're not allowed to bring our guns. And so the idea of him just basically having more guns to replace his various weapons, I like the idea of that, and it works in the same vein as Lord Godalming, except it's instead of getting items faster, he can hold on to them longer. And it doesn't make it where it like beats strength. Strength still cancels the weapon and keeps it from working. He just gets the item back. So he has this sort of combat attrition as opposed to like a strategic attrition of getting items faster. Is that better or worse? I don't know. That's actually kind of an interesting thing. I basically was like, Quincy Morris will be a little bit more combat focused. The next ability I have for Quincy Morris is Traveler. He is in the book visiting from Texas and is this rich, like cattle baron. Basically, there's a lot of rich people in Texas. I won't say if I'm one of them or not. The thing about being rich is that you never know it once you have it. But when you're poor, you know it. So if you don't know if you're rich, that means you probably are. But I'm getting existential now. Let's talk about the Traveler ability. Once per turn, when you discard a train ticket, you may immediately regain that train ticket. So this I actually really like because this it's different than the privilege ability, and it's specifically tailored towards the horse economy thing. And so the idea I had is like, oh yeah, of course, Quincy would be like the horse type guy. He has talked about being on the range in the books and stuff, and taking care of cattle and stuff, and of course, a Texan. And it allows for, and it's once per turn, and so it allows for those times when you say accidentally lose a white one, or if you want to use a white one, you don't have to then immediately lose it, and you could use a 3-2 and then pull it back. In terms of general like utility, it's probably a little worse than privilege of just getting 2 tickets, because like Lord Godalming can get the white ones faster, but with Quincy Morris, once he has the white ones, the risk of losing them isn't as high. And so that's like I wanted things that were interesting trade-offs. I wanted him to be as good as Lord Godalming, just different. He doesn't get stuff faster for either his weapons or his tickets, but he holds on to them longer. We sort of have the same design philosophy for both of these. And then the alternate events, the promise. Oh, I had to mess with the wording on this so much. Ugh. And the theme behind this is that when Mina basically says, I'm turning into a vampire, I need you all to commit to kill me if I turn evil, and they all sort of make this pact that they're all gonna, if any of them turn into a vampire, they're gonna kill them, and they have this commitment to fight evil and to slay Dracula, and Quincy is the first person to commit to that. And spoilers for the book, he dies fulfilling that promise. The design philosophy behind all of these characters is as a sort of like a what if scenario. Like a what if these were the people that went out to fight, and Van Helsing, Lord Godalming, and Mina, and John Seward were all the ones who died. Or you can come up with a different what if scenario. But the idea is that Quincy has this greater commitment to killing Dracula, this promise, this honor-bound thing. And so his ability of this event, playable by Quincy Morris at the start of combat, so similar to Lucy's Revenge. This is replacing Lucy's Revenge. During this combat, if Quincy would die, he doesn't die till the end of combat. At the start of combat, Quincy takes 2 damage, and Dracula reveals his opening hand of combat cards. So it doesn't cancel an escape as bat, and it doesn't really prevent him from dying. This is instead more of an aggressive play, whereas Lucy's Revenge is a canceling an escape, which is super strong. That's a really strong event, so I need something that's really strong here too. Making it where Quincy doesn't die till the end of combat, I think, is really strong, and it allows for those situations like what happened in the book, where Quincy and Jonathan kill Dracula and then Quincy dies. That's not actually really an effect that can happen in this game, except sort of with Heroic Leap. And you could play this in combo with Heroic Leap. You could play this first. I think you could play this in combo with Heroic Leap if you played this first. No, not quite. It would be pointless. This is basically just an alternate version of Heroic Leap. Like, it damages him, so I need a really strong ability. But the whole you don't die till the end of combat, and so you can wail on Dracula as much as you want, that seems strong to me. And Quincy was also the tactician. One of the original names of this card was Tactician. The whole looking at Dracula's opening hand of cards, that's really strong. And so, but again, it's making him take damage. If this is too strong, maybe we up that damage. But Quincy was the tactician type guy. He was the guy who made the promise to kill Dracula first. He's the guy who risked his life to try to die, and when he dived in, he did it with no regard for himself, so that's what That's what this card is representing. In terms of what he looks like, I think the depiction of the guy holding the crucifix is kind of what I think of when I think of Quincy Morris. There's a lot of faces in this game, like the dog, which are not represented by characters in the game. And that's interesting to me. So I'm gonna sort of grab from some of these, although I don't have one for some. But I sort of assume that this is kind of what Quincy Morris looks like. He has no hat, but we mostly wear the cowboy hats for show to impress girls or to scare Yankees. Just like our accent, which we can turn on and off whenever we have a hankering to. Which also is talked about in the book, proving that uh, Bram Stoker must have known a Texan or known about Texans because he actually kind of nails Quincy Morris in terms of personality, where they put on the airs of being this rough and tumble country type, but are actually like these sort of sophisticated people, but they don't want anyone to know that. That's a Texan. Okay, Thomas Builder is probably my favorite of the new characters, and somebody who I really wished was in the game. Originally, I really wanted him as an ally, um, but I'm making new hunters, not new allies, and I basically gave him an ally with the ability that I wanted. So if you haven't read the book, read the book. But one of the best characters in the book is this guy named Thomas Builder, who's this zookeeper who's interviewed in the newspaper of this big long interaction he has with Dracula, and he's this expert on wolves, and talking to him and investigating with him lets him know that something weird is going on with the dog that escaped from the boat, and that there's and this wolf that's going around, and they get a lot. And the interview, it's not by any of the hunters, but it's by a newspaper person, and they read it. Um, and they get a lot of information about dogs and wolves, and it's one of the big clues that they get. And it's this big long sentence sequence, this big long interview, and he's like this down to earth, tricky, and really funny guy who who was cracking all these jokes and tricky and being tricky and like pulling the newspaper reporter's leg a lot and tricking him in a lot of ways with his turns of phrase. And he's just too fun that I felt like, come on, he's got to be in the game. So I had him replace Dr. Seward. Now, Dr. Seward is one of the strongest hunters in the game, so it's like, oh goodness, how do you replace Dr. Seward? You got to give him really strong abilities. So I kept the HP the same. I kept the HP the same, I think, for all of these except for the last one. So his main ability, or his first ability, Zookeeper. You may keep dogs and fast horses revealed. If you do, then they do not count towards your item limit. So this is sort of similar to Seward's, in the sense that Seward can carry an extra item. Thomas Builder can carry an unlimited number of extra items that are dogs and horses. Which, is that better? I guess technically, but not necessarily. Generally, you want your horse on Seward, but what if the other people don't? Then Seward's ability is better than this one. Having extra dogs, I just wanted something to make dogs seem kind of good, which sort of goes with his second ability. I mean, again, Seward is really strong, so I need a really strong version of this. The one thing about this is that it doesn't make him any better in terms of combat for his items, because dogs and horses don't help with combat, except for this tricky ability, which I had as I thought, okay, Seward can heal fast, which is really good. So maybe Thomas Builder can help, like, prevent damage, as opposed to being, like, reactive, which is what Seward's ability is. Thomas Builder's ability is going to be, like, proactive. So we had tricky, because the guy is very tricky in the books, he is very clever, and he even is kind of sassy towards Dracula, and which is great. He kind of he has read the book, man. This is one of the best parts in the book. Okay, when a hunter in your space would take damage, you may discard 2 items to prevent that damage limit once per combat. So that's really strong. It can cancel a single source of damage. I guess you could use it to cancel Heroic Leap. I may want to retool that so that it's not possible to interact that way. So many interactions in this game. And discarding 2 items is pretty strong. And remember, when you're replacing all 4 with the new ones, it's not like you can fill up with Lord Godalming and give him back to Thomas Builder. Um, and so theoretically, you're having a whole bunch of dogs that you're using basically to prevent damage and sicking them on Dracula to distract and do all this stuff. Because his prime, like he was a zookeeper, but his specialty that he talked about was dogs and wolves. So I wanted a character that you were encouraged to give all of the dogs to, and he can just use dogs, and that's cool to me. Um, It is it better? I guess maybe a little. I don't know. It's limit once per combat, which okay, so it can save you like once from damage. But the idea is that if you wait until the end, Dracula might break a bunch of your stuff by that time, and then you can't use it, or then you don't want to use it because you're having to discard like a horse or a heavenly host or something really valuable. It's a big trade-off, but preventing damage seems good. It feels these abilities make him feel sort of as strong as Seward, but differently so. Um, in sort of like a more higher risk, higher reward. Like his abilities are generally higher reward than Seward's, but have a higher like requirement. Like you have to specifically get dogs and horses, and you have to discard items to prevent the damage. But the damage can be that most important damage, the damage that's going to kill you. Whereas with Seward, it's just sort of this passive thing. And also, I kind of felt like Seward's passive healing was just a little too strong, sort of making damaging almost feel moot in a lot of circumstances. So I liked this more reactive style. Okay, his event is Berserka. Berserka is the name of his main wolf friend, who he talks about and is a big part in the book. And he's like, oh yeah, well, my Berserka, who's a wolf, does this, this, and this. So this wolf that I saw running around was acting very, very weird. This replaces Wax Cylinders. So the idea is Wax Cylinders is this event that focuses on hide, and Berserka is an event that focuses on escape as wolf. So this is actually an ally, which is interesting. This is a one-off that's usable as an ally, but it's not play immediately, unlike all of the other allies, which would require a lot of explanation in the rules. Like most allies, you have to play immediately, not Berserka. Playable by Thomas Builder as an action to track or ally, not play immediately. Track. Dracula must reveal the location associated with wolf form. And the ally effect is when Dracula uses wolf form, it costs 2 additional blood. I might make that 1 additional blood. This is sort of a weird combination of the water guy. Why can't I think of his name? I haven't played Fury of Dracula in so long. Um, it's a weird combination of the allies where it's sort of like increasing the cost for movement and using certain abilities, uh, but it's also sort of like Wax Cylinders in that it is revealing. It can reveal the location, and this is really fun because it's like Dracula might not. He might be worried to use the wolf form. But sometimes with the wolf form, you're moving so fast, it's like, great, I'm all the way over here, or you've revealed me. And again, the track is a one-shot thing. And it's sort of this idea of, do I wait for him to use wolf form and I use the track, or do I use it now, and then he can wolf form, but it costs more blood? That seems interesting. I might drop this down to 1. I don't know why I'm thinking his name is Henry. I know it's not Henry. Because I'm thinking of Patrick Hennessy, which is the guy who replaces Van Helsing. So Patrick Hennessy is Seward's, like, main assistant who runs the asylum and helps him with a whole bunch of stuff. There's a whole bunch of sequences where he's asking Patrick Henry to help Hennessy to help him with surgery. He's a surgeon. He helps with a lot of the investigation. There's this sequence where he bribes a bunch of people who are moving some of Dracula's crates to and just like immediately makes friends with them. So he has this really like charisma and ability to make friends with anybody to get information, and is generally very helpful. I really wanted the reporter who interviewed Thomas Builder, but he is never named in the book, and I wanted only named characters. Although Patrick Hennessy is fun, and he also appears in a lot of the movies. Actually, generally Seward has some sort of assistant who does something, and that's Patrick Hennessy. In fact, you could argue that Patrick Hennessy is actually the ability of being able to carry an extra item, because Seward doesn't just represent Seward, but he also represents like his entire asylum that he runs with all of his staff that are helping him. All of the people in the book are like these big leaders of various things, except, with lots of assistants and stuff, and Seward just has like this army of assistants, and so that's kind of why he can carry an extra item. But now I've made him an entire full character. And so his main ability, he's 9 health, is report. And this is named after the effect that a lot of times when Seward is like corresponding with his asylum, it's with Patrick Hennessy, and a lot of times he's asking Patrick Hennessy to do research for him and whatnot. So it's and this is the main effect involving events, which is instead of leadership. So instead of just being able to trade items like with Van Helsing, you have this thing, which is when a hunter would discard an event, and I think I'm going to specify this is would discard an event due to hand size. You may give that event card to another hunter, then become delayed if not delayed already. So you can use this ability if you're delayed. If you're not delayed, it makes you delayed. But it essentially allows whenever you're having to discard an event to it to go to whoever needs it. So the interesting thing about this is that it's more efficient theoretically in the sense that it could cost only one action to get this event to whoever needs it. But you can't just do it when you want to. What's so powerful about Van Helsing's ability is you can, I'm just going to trade this now. I'm just going to give this event card to the person who needs it, now you have it, for an action. This is far more action point efficient. You spend way fewer actions. At most you spend one, and you don't have to trade it to Van Helsing and then trade it to who needs it. You trade it directly, but it only happens when you exceed your hand limit. So you have less control, but you have more actions. That seems like an interesting trade-off to me. And so that's why I designed it that way. Again, I haven't tested these. I don't know how balanced these are, but I really want them to be balanced. I really, really want. I really am a big believer in balance. I think it's the most important thing in a board game, and that any game that says it is not balanced is the worst thing that it can say about itself. Because at that point, you're not playing a game, you're playing a faction picking competition, and whoever picks the right faction is the guy who wins, or the guy who has the advantage, and that's not fun to me. So yeah, I really can't exaggerate that enough that I really want balance. And of course, I would have to playtest all of this stuff. Okay, moving on. Surgeon. So this is instead of the I forget the name. I think it's called Strong Will. I want to say. Um. Oh man, why can't I? I don't know. I don't know. It's early. I don't know what the name of the event is on Van Helsing's ability, but when a hunter in your space would be removed from combat, you may choose for them not to. So this, to me, sort of seems stronger than Van Helsing's ability of being able to take another bite. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and just say that it is. Rufus Smith. That was the name of the ocean guy. I've been trying to think of it this whole time. I didn't have to just look it up on my phone. That's not what I was doing while I was thinking this whole time, but I knew you guys were all going to say it in the comments. Rufus Smith. Okay. So this is stronger. I basically, I think, was saying I wanted the surgeon ability to be stronger and the trading event cards to be weaker, because not being able to trade events when you want to is actually a pretty big disadvantage. Okay, and although I did give him another hit point, maybe I'll drop that down. But yeah, making it where, so this is basically these both sort of interact with bite. But instead of like not taking the bite or like not caring about the extra bite, this is not caring about the remove from combat bit. And that seems strong, and I kind of like that. That is cool to me. It feels different, but at least similar in a sort of way. And it's sort of like where Seward was this sort of healing people after the fact, to just sort of passively help them, and he's also a psychologist and helping them deal with the various trauma and whatnot of fighting vampires. Hennessy is more of like the emergency surgeon on the scene, or he actually and he is. He's a surgeon in the books where he's having to stitch people up, and I think it's even Hennessy who stitches up Seward's arm when he gets knifed by Renfield. I'm not sure about that though. I'll have to look that up. I did a lot of looking up of this years and years ago when I first started creating these characters and been putting a lot of work into them ever since. But I like the idea of something that gets around the remove from combat thing because it's a very common effect in the game, uh, and a lot of times it kind of feels annoying. So yeah, maybe it should have a cost associated with it. Um, but that's what I have. That's what I have for now. Again, I've changed these abilities so much. I can change them again infinitely as much as I want, without being able to playtest them, and I probably would never be able to. I'm not going to be able to get these perfect. But event replaces Mystic Research. Now, Mystic Research is one of the most powerful events in the game, so I'm going to need something real powerful. So I have Bribery and Persuasion, which are two things Patrick Hennessy is used for. Somewhat humorously in the book, where these people are cussing him out and complaining about this crazy man who has attacked them, and it's like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. Here, have some ale and a few crowns." And they're like, "Oh, now they're best friends," and they tell him everything they possibly want to know. So, only playable by Patrick Hennessy. Play as an action. Choose up to 2 event cards with a play immediately effect from the discard pile and play them. So that could be, and I really like this because while Mystic Research is just like get more events, this is like, okay, get 2, but they can only be play immediately ones that you've already used. Now, in terms of things that are play immediately, I guess I'm just going to have to look this up because hopefully immediately. Whoop. Oh, I don't know how to spell. Never spell in public. I'm just gonna. Whoop. It's. Oh, the game is not. How good is? Nope. It's only gonna be. It's just looking amongst the titles. The titles are not named. But things like playing immediately behind the veil. Actually, that's a really strong one. Now it's picking 2, so you can't like pick behind the veil twice. Um, Things like evil presence, um, hired scouts is the obvious one. You're probably going to get some of this, and it sort of just seems like something Patrick Hennessy would do as like the guy with the money and it's more like he has the connections is the idea. Whereas like instead of like Godalming being like the rich guy, or Van Helsing being the smart guy, Patrick Hennessy seems to be the guy who has more friends and is able to like converse with the lower classes and the random people, and he like, oh yeah, he knows a guy. That just sort of is the feel I get from the book. I think it's part of the reason he's sent on all these research missions. And so the idea of being able to just like, oh yeah, I know the scouts, I can hire more scouts, and all of the allies too. We can pull back if you want to do like a cheap hired scouts or the local rumors. Um, when I first designed this character, it was actually it wouldn't be any of these. Could be newspaper reports, but again, that's sort of like a weaker version of the other ones. So most of the play immediately effects are the Finding Dracula stuff. So it's a little more like you get 2 events on tap that are really strong, but they're just the Find Dracula ones, which is interesting. I think it's interesting to sort of narrow that, and I think Mystic Research is better. But again, Surgeon is such a powerful ability that I thought it was okay to sort of bump up the power of his event, which I think is cool. And I kind of like Patrick Hennessy in the book. Um, and yeah, you have to, of course, play them. But yeah, the idea of this is an event that lets you store play immediately events seems interesting to me. Okay, and finally, Lucy Westenra, who replaces Mina. So this is sort of like a what if Mina died instead of Lucy thing. Because, again, the final character has to be somebody who's bitten. And yeah, for Drained, it, like, literally, it has to be the same as Mina, because there has to be somebody who's bitten. There isn't really a way to get around that. I gave her 1 fewer hit points, maybe because I was just trying to be different, but uh, I like the idea of the later characters being weaker, and I don't know, maybe I should. I guess it was just a theme reason that I didn't give Patrick Hennessy 1 fewer hit points, but maybe I should, just to be consistent. So the main ability needs to be something that helps you find Dracula. And so does the event. I mean, Lucy Westenra is or the Mina Harker is like the Finding Dracula character, the weak character who can find Dracula better. So the design philosophy is actually pretty easy on this. So with Lucy, I gave her an ability which I think is actually really cool and is a different type of deduction that I think is really fun. Spend an action during day if another his hunter is in your space to become delayed. At the end of your next turn, so that would be night, um, which you would just undelay with. So basically, it's a sleepwalking. You're going to sleep and you're spending your night asleep. You undelay, and Dracula must move you one road space on the shortest route towards his current location, which I think is really cool. It's annoying as heck because it's like, okay, what is the shortest route? Hold on, let me see. Uh, and so I just kind of I would definitely only want this for the digital game where it just tells you these are the shortest routes you can pick between these two. Um, and it's an easy thing to accidentally lie about, so it really would only work in the digital edition, but it seems fun to me. This is a fun sort of deductive thing. It's like, oh, okay, he's on this half of the board, he's this way. I think it's stronger than Mina's, which is why I downgraded her hit points. This is like, she's overtooled for finding Dracula. She's way better. And again, this is the thing she did in the book. She was sleepwalking, and she would be literally going to Dracula to get fed on. And so this is again the sort of like what if scenario where they save Lucy, Mina dies, and they're like, okay, we know that when she sleepwalks, where with Mina it was like, haha, we know that when we can hypnotize her and Dracula's trying to take hold, she can be talking to Dracula and getting information about him, and we can attack him that way. This is sort of like the what if of, oh, we know when Lucy's sleepwalking, she's actually moving towards Dracula, so we can follow her and figure stuff out, and that's why you need somebody else there. Similar idea with Mina. And I think it's fun for deductive things, but it takes out like a lot of actions. You're losing a day action and a night action. It's a two action thing. It's sort of like a hypnosis on tap, but it's not as good as hypnosis, um, because it's just like, okay, he's in this direction, and again, and also because a hunter is having to be in that location and she moves last. It's almost like you're giving up two hunter entire turns to know where Dracula is, and that's a fun trade off. Again, the game is all about fun trade offs. And I think this has that. So the event is Lucy's Diary, which replaces Hypnosis. Playable by Lucy Westerner only. Play as an action. If Dracula is in your region, he must reveal his location, then become delayed. So this, I wanted to have at least some effect in the game that dealt with the regions, because if we take out Psychic Link and Hypnosis, then regions are irrelevant to the game. And that's not very cool. So I wanted at least one thing to do that. And I wanted something that rewards you, like, haha, we're close to knowing where he is. So we can use this to pinpoint his precise location. But again, it delays Mina. And sometimes knowing exactly where he is isn't necessarily that helpful. Unless he's in a really bad location. And again, because she goes last, it's sort of like, oh, well, dang it. We know where he is, and now he's going to wolf form and get away. That makes Speedy Telegraph good. Again, when you're designing this, you have to be thinking about every single card. You need to design all four of these characters so that Speedy Telegraph is still a good card to use, which I think it still is. And in that regard, maybe I will drop his HP down, because, again, the later characters need to be weaker. But I've changed these so many times. So those are my four characters. In terms of what they look like, I don't think I have one for Lucy because there's not a lot of women. This, I think, is what Van Helsing looks like. Thomas Builder, I always thought was this guy. He just sort of seems like this more sturdy blue-collar guy. He's not in any of the other characters, and he just, yeah, that's just kind of what I think of when I think of Thomas Builder. As for Patrick Hennessy, he kind of looks like Patrick Hennessy. He's like he's upper middle class. Like, he's not the guy who runs the asylum, but he's he is a surgeon. He's an educated guy. He's a bigger wig kind of guy, or maybe something like the guy on Dodge. I don't think that's supposed to be Lord Godalming. I think that's just This could also be Patrick Hennessy. And I would want to use art that already exists in the game, because there's a lot of unused, like, okay, this is Van Helsing, and This is Mina, obviously. But like, who the heck is this guy? I don't know. Is that supposed to be Lord Godleming? It doesn't look like Lord Godleming. Um, Obviously, this is Lord Godalmalmaming. I hate pronouncing things correctly. And this is Mina, but not this guy. That's Mina if you lose. This obviously is Mina, but who the heck is the guy on rifle? You know, it seems like there is room in the design space with the idea of new characters, and you would want to use this old art as much as you could. Um, do I think new characters will ever be added? No, not unless there's a new version. But if they do, you are welcome to use my characters. Games Workshop, or whoever ends up buying the license, because the licensing of this game is a total mess. And on that thought, Godspeed.